Israel Update with Gadi and Mike Duran. Hello and welcome to Tablet's Israel Update. It's the 21st of March and it's been 1 year, 5 months and 2 weeks since this war began. We're 2 weeks away from the year and a half mark. I'm Gadi in Tel Aviv, and co-host of this podcast is Dr. Mike Duran, ensconced in his office in Washington, D.C. Hello, Mike.
Hi, Gadi. I'm as sane as possible under the circumstances. Are you?
I haven't checked this morning. It's been a whirlwind morning. I've been tweeting nonstop and recording podcasts here because there is great turmoil about which you shall shed light in your headlines.
My news headlines. Yes, today is a Gadi day. There are Gadi days and Mike days. Today, this one was tailor-made for you. Let me
Shame,
quickly
because
hit.
it's a bad hair day for me.
But every day is a bad hair day for you.
Why do you say that?
Oh, I was making fun of the fact that you're bald and I'm not.
I am. Oh,
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm
look
sorry.
that up.
Sorry to tell you that. Listen. There are two Mike issues I'll mention quickly, and that's that the Israeli military expanded its ground operations across the Gaza Strip. And secondly, Donald Trump has changed significantly the rules of engagement that were restricting the American military's ability to strike at the Houthis. We'll talk about that later. Let's quickly get to the Gadi stuff here. This is incredibly dramatic. The cabinet unanimously authorized the ouster of Shabak director Ronnen Bar and determined that his tenure will end on April 10. That's 10 days before originally planned. Ronnen Bar did not attend the cabinet meeting last night, in which the decision was made and which lasted over 3 hours, but he sent a letter to ministers. Prime Minister Netanyahu commented during the meeting that he had lost confidence in Ronnen Bar since October 7th. He remarked that a democratic country, especially one like Israel, obviously can't go on when their basic trust is lacking between the prime minister and the head of a prominent security service. I do not believe Ronnen Bar is the right man to rehabilitate the organization, Netanyahu said. About the hostage deals, he said that Ronnen Bar's attitude was too soft, not as firm as needed, as is needed, and that the security cabinet was too quick to surrender to the demands of Hamas. He said a lot of other things too, but let me move on to a letter that Ronnen Bar wrote to the cabinet. He accused them of acting illegally with improper motives and in an attempt to prevent the pursuit of truth. That's a quote, pursuit of truth regarding the events that led to October 7th. And he also said that they are preventing the pursuit of truth into the investigation that has become known as Qatargate, Gadi. So we see here the judicial reform issue and the debate over what went wrong on October 7th, all kind of combined into one. In addition to the firing of Ronnen Bar, there's a report today in Yediot Achronot that the cabinet is also intent on firing Attorney General Gali Baharav Miara. And the process of her ouster is supposed to begin, according to the paper, at Sunday's cabinet meeting. All the former attorneys general, all of them issued a joint statement yesterday in which they warned, quote, the likely ouster of Baharav Miara will badly undermine the independence of the institutions of the rule of law, unquote. This morning, in breaking news, the Supreme Court has frozen the firing of Ronnen Bar. And Gadi, and one last, also it's reported that Aharon Barak did a barrage of interviews yesterday. Aharon Barak is the former president of the Supreme Court and the architect of the judicial system that now, the controversial judicial system that now reigns in Israel. And he has warned of a civil war that's brewing because of the divide in Israeli society. Final issue, Gadi. Diaspora Affairs Minister Amichai Shikli invited right-wing European politicians to an official conference to combat anti-Semitism. This drew criticism from prominent Jewish individuals in Europe. Germany's anti-Semitism czar Felix Klein canceled his participation in the conference, as did the French philosopher Bernard-Henri Lévy. Over to you, Gadi.
Yeah, so if anybody has nightmares about a deep state, as you know, Prime Minister Netanyahu is now speaking of a deep state. Here you have it, a judiciary that is...
Where did the phrase deep state come from?
I don't know. Where?
You don't?
No.
It came into English and every other language from Turkish.
Really?
Yeah. Just another gift of the Turks to us. Because the military, you remember, in Turkey used to reign supreme over the political echelon. And so every now and then the Turkish military would move in and carry out a coup, throw the generals would throw the politicians out, rule for a little while, then hold new elections and let them back in. And so
here we are.
Yeah, so there we are.
And so here we are. Yeah.
What was unique? Sorry, what was unique about the system was in lots of other countries, the generals would move in, but they never moved out. In
Turkey, they just popped in for visits in order to make sure
they popped in. They were the guardians of the system, and it is actually the guy who's primarily responsible for overturning that system and putting the politicians in charge over the generals is Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Your
friend, as the media keeps saying, Mike.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think the parallels between the Turks and the Israelis are really much greater than either one of them wants to admit. But anyway, go ahead.
So the Supreme Court is now protecting the head of Shabak from a democratically elected government. So if you want a deep state conspiracy, there you have it. But there's no need for a conspiracy. Everybody is well aware of what is going. Ronnen Bar, you said the former president of the Supreme Court, as we like to joke here, he is the sitting president, the eternal sitting president of the deep state. So once in a while he pops out and issues orders, like when the attorney general was supposed to consider the indictments against Netanyahu, and he popped to the media and said, I'm sure that Attorney General Mandelblit would not disappoint me and Shamgar, the two legendary heads of the Supreme Court. And indeed, Mandelblit didn't disappoint them. And that happens. That happens repeatedly when Yariv Levin rolled out his now defunct judicial reform. Barak.
Yariv Levin, the justice minister.
The justice minister, with his now infamous defunct judicial reform, which was supposed to limit the power of the Supreme Court. Then Aaron Barak popped again for another media visit in which he said that this is a necklace of poisoned chavuzim, poisoned pieces. What is in a necklace? It was a very...
I don't know.
The pieces on the string. That was
I don't know. I don't know the word
in English. We have one in Hebrew. The metaphor was really awkward, but the message was really clear. And what it said is, don't compromise. And now he popped into a media interview and said that, well, this is all going towards a civil war. And he said that perhaps bloodshed is the only solution to such conundrums. And so what this means is this is a hint to the Supreme Court to marshal its forces and stand its ground, or rather stand behind Ronnen Bar. And indeed, surprisingly, this morning we heard that they already did something that the law does not authorize them to do, and suspend the government in its legal function. In Israel, like in democracy, I'm saying like because we're not really a democracy, it's a joke, but like in democracies, the law, at least the letter of the law, says very clearly that the secret police, the Shin Bet, the General Security Services it is called, is subordinate to the government. It also says that the government can remove a sitting head of the Shin Bet. And Ronnen Bar basically said that he would not move from his chair until the proper forum decides that. The proper forum apparently being the Supreme Court. So they're inventing a form of government, and the whole press is just parroting this. You look at the Israeli press, and they're rallying the troops to save democracy from elected officials. They're rallying behind the failed head of the Shabak. The person.
I have to say that your whole analysis of this thing from the beginning has really been remarkably insightful. I mean, what you have always said about the juristocracy, Israel not being a democracy, being a juristocracy, you can now see it right before your eyes. There's no way to interpret this any other way. There's not. I don't know of any other system where the judicial where the Supreme Court, where there's this kind of judicial structure over the government that feels it very comfortable reaching into any kind of executive function, any kind of executive office, and telling them what they can do and what they can't do. It's crazy. It's absolutely insane.
It's crazy, and Israelis have gotten used to this. We now forgot, but when there was an election here, and there were parliamentary maneuvers. This was before the unity government with Gantz and Netanyahu as joint prime ministers, or whatever that strange monster was. And there were parliamentary maneuvers where the Speaker of the House was postponing the vote on replacing the Speaker of the House because he knew there were negotiations going on. And the Supreme Court decided for the Knesset when the vote would be held. Just if you think about judges in America telling the majority leader of the House how to run his house, then you'd see the absurdity. But that's a small thing. Now what we have is we have a head of Shin Bet who is basically rebelling against the government. And this is what we saw on the night of October 7. Remember, Mike, according to the interpretation, which I mentioned here, which I have heard in my Hebrew podcast here, and absurdly, the media is not asking these questions. The media is only interested in ousting Netanyahu. So it's not asking, where was the army? Why did you not wake Netanyahu up on the night between October 6 and 7? And this was Ronnen Bar's decision, according to a former Shabak person whom I interviewed on my podcast. And what he said was that this is the whole, you have the whole peace processor mindset here, because they thought that it could not be otherwise, except that Yahya Sinwar is becoming moderate, because this helps improve the standard of living in Gaza. And any sane person would never give that up. So that's their interpretation. And on the night where all this intelligence information is amassing, including the lighting up of Israeli SIMs, a great number. Ronnen Bar is, I think, confusing the public debate about the numbers, but everyone who came into Israel carrying a phone needed an Israeli SIM. So you had very clear indications, including the heads of Hamas going into the tunnels, things we haven't seen before.
Oh, I never understood. I kept reading in the Israeli press about the SIM card as an early indicator. I never fully understood what this meant. So these guys all put these Hamas killers all put Israeli SIM cards in their phones, and that allowed the Israelis to see that there was a movement into Israel.
But they did. Honestly, we have to admit they did this before in exercises, but now they were supporting other incidents. You see, they have Palestinian SIMs usually, and the reception is not as good, and especially inside Israel, you can't communicate with Palestinian SIMs. So they penetrated Israel pretty deeply. So in order to coordinate between them, they needed Israeli SIM cards. And these all light up on the night of October, between October 6 and 7. And there were other supporting sides. But what does Shabak do? And here, I heard in my podcast, Mike, this would interest you, another systemic problem with Israel's security. Shabak is traditionally responsible for intelligence in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. The Palestinian territories, as we used to call them, or I used to call them. I don't call them that anymore. So the Shabak is responsible for intelligence, but the army is responsible for army operations. So you have a complete divorce between army operations and Shabak intelligence. The army is completely blind in Gaza, so it trusts Shabak. And since Ronnen Bar has this peace process mindset, he cannot fathom a Hamas attack on Israel. So the interpretation that they come up with, the consultations that they had in Shabak that night, the interpretation was that Hamas is afraid of an Israeli invasion, and that is why it is nervous. This is why Ronnen Bar comes to the army then, or one of his subordinates comes to the army and says, do not raise the alert, because Hamas is already on edge, and we might inadvertently cause escalation here and be dragged into a war. And for the very same reason, Mike, they did not wake up Prime Minister Netanyahu or his Minister of Defense, because their analysis, according to this mindset, is that the danger is, they call it miscalculation. That's a term that they use. And these politicians, especially the hawkish right wing, is especially vulnerable to miscalculations. So if you wake up the prime minister, he will start a war. So the job is to keep this secret from him. So Netanyahu has to work with people who systematically conceal information from him, and that should have been in a proper democracy reason enough to fire Ronnen Bar on October 8th. But he had to work with him, and they kept undermining him. And now they have invented this Qatar gate.
So according to Netanyahu is suggesting, well, I have two things I want to say here, or observations, questions I have. First of all, let me just tell you how it looks to me from a distance, and tell me if this is right. Since the election of Donald Trump, basically, it's become obvious that all of the efforts which we discussed here of the Americans to work with the anti-Netanyahu elements in the political, among politicians, among NGOs, among people in the elements in the security establishment, to bring down the government have failed. Even worse than that, from the point of view of the opponents of Netanyahu, Netanyahu's gotten stronger. So he now has his own choice of chief of staff in the military. He has a government that with enough of a margin that there's no vote of confidence that could possibly topple him. He's going to get the budget passed. He'll take care of the issue of the Haredim in the Haredim draft law. All these possible third rails that might have tripped him up. He's going to be able to get through, get over those, and he's increasingly taking control of policy on all levels. So the only element that really can work against him now is Ronnen Bar. There's no one else. If Ronnen Bar goes down, then Netanyahu is an extremely empowered prime minister with complete control, as is normal in a democracy, right?
Not so long as the Supreme Court is hostile, Mike, and the Attorney General.
No, but I'm saying within the system,
security establishment.
Yeah, the issue of the hostile Supreme Court and Attorney General remains, but within the security establishment, the government is firm. The Netanyahu government is firmly in control, and the Supreme Court will not have any allies. That's what it looks like to me. Is that why this is coming to a head right now?
I think so. Yeah, I think that they are very nervous, and also you have to see what happened in Israel yesterday. The police they keep saying now the Ben Gvir police, because Ben Gvir, by the way, is once more
I forgot to put that in the news. He's a minister again.
He's one. Sorry, he's once more the Minister of Internal Security. So and he appointed a police chief that no longer caters to the anti-Netanyahu forces. And this was so obvious in Tel Aviv. In Tel Aviv, courtesy of the Attorney General and the head of the Tel Aviv police, who said, nobody knows what my political views are. He now participates in the demonstrations against Netanyahu. And everybody knew what his political views are, because he allowed the demonstrators to block Ayalon.
What's his name?
His name is Ami Eshed, and he was applauded when he would appear in the Kaplan demonstrations against Netanyahu every Saturday. And they lit bonfires on the Ayalon highway. They did whatever they wanted. And now the protest was much thinner, but as happens, it became more violent. They don't understand. These are not the days of the struggle over the reform. We are at war, and many more Israelis have no patience with these disturbances of the public order. So they went to Jerusalem, and with a number of cars, just a handful of cars, they blocked the traffic for the whole capital. And the Jerusalem police now took these people and arrested them and confiscated their cars. And, we were all looking at this and saying, wow, what does this mean? Suddenly the left is also obliged to follow the law? What the hell happened here? Because if you look at the depth of this tilt in law enforcement in Israel, when the settlers were protesting the disengagement of Gaza in 2005, 700 indictments were issued, and people were indiscriminately put in incarceration, in detention. And how many indictments for the whole of the protest against the reform? Do you want to take a guess?
I'm going to take a guess. And there's going to be 1.
4. You're on the scale between 700 and 0.
I knew it wouldn't be 0. I knew it wouldn't be 0. There had to be more than 0, but less than 5.
So this is the regime we're living in. And so this is just to support your argument and say that the police can no longer be relied on to be busy with the interception of the right and enabling the anarchy on the left, or as risibly the Attorney General has said when people were, petitioning against these disturbances of the public order, this constant blocking of traffic and everything else. He said there is no such thing as an effective protest without disturbing the public order. So now there is, apparently, if you're on the left, you can block streets, because how else would you protest? And so you're right that the Netanyahu government is slowly taking pieces away from this deep state constellation which defeated the reform. But okay, that's it.
I have a couple of questions here. One is, so the hostage issue, of course, has been weaponized and politicized from day one against Netanyahu, and it's still there. And in the exchange of letters, or the comments that Netanyahu made that were reported to the press in the cabinet meeting, dealt in part with the hostages, and then Ronnen Bar, in his letter to the cabinet, talked about the hostages as well. So the hostage issue is maybe not front and center, but it's there. Also, we have the fighting has resumed in Gaza, and the debate in Israel about the fighting in Gaza is, of course, all wrapped up with the hostages. How do you think the public opinion is going to take all of this right now?
I think that the left is not taking the true measure of the mounting public anger against this continuous undermining of democracy in the name of democracy. So can we
assume that it's going to be still that there's this 50-50 divide in Israel and everyone is going to read it within that? Or is there some percentage of people who don't really love Netanyahu but think that the Ronnen Bar and the judicial establishment have really gone too far here?
I think that there are, and this is what enabled Netanyahu to say in his statement that no Supreme Court decision would change the fact that there is no trust between himself and the head of the Shabak. So Netanyahu is now preempting the Supreme Court for probable attempt to try and undermine the move that he made. They will surely protect the Attorney General. And so we are heading for a constitutional clash or a constitutional crisis. The question now is, Mike, on our side, on the right side, who believe that the Supreme Court cannot keep running this country. This complete divorce between authority and accountability cannot continue, and it is not proper in a democracy that people who are unelected, who have veto power, for appointing their own leftist friends to the highest court, which is our Uber government. This can't go on. But the question is, and wise people are asking it, is this the right time? We now have a window of opportunity. We need to win the war in Gaza. I'll be happy to say why I think that we can finally win the war in Gaza. And we have an opportunity, most probably, for taking out the Iranian nuclear program. Is this the time to hand the left a constitutional crisis which might shake the government? I don't have a clear answer to it. I would prefer to postpone all this until after the attack that I hope would come on Iran. But I spoke this morning to a member of Knesset on my Hebrew podcast, who is also in the Committee on Foreign Affairs and Security in the Knesset, Amit Halevi, and Amit said, "You don't understand. We cannot run the war if they're putting obstacles in our path continuously. We cannot run the war with a hostile Shabak. We cannot run the war with the Supreme Court intervening all the time." Let me remind you that the Supreme Court has now accepted for discussion a petition by proxy from Gaza through NGOs that they are now debating the legality.
I don't know. I find it so funny. If I had a novelist's ability, I would love to write a short story about it's such a this whole Supreme Court overreach is really, to me, ultimately it's absurd and funny. I can't.
I keep saying that here.
When I talk to my my left wing Israeli friends, and I have them, and they for them, as you say, this is totally normal. It's totally normal, and this is the essence of democracy. And they immediately start talking to me about checks and balances. You have to have checks.
Or as I say, who will monitor the government? It would have unlimited power. So there's a monitor. They're the monitor. And but what I wanted to finish. I also think it's funny, Mike. But when I do, people treat me like feminism treats you. It's not funny, and it is funny. And we should laugh them out. Because as Hannah Arendt rightly said, there's nothing so subversive of authority like laughter. And in the end, they will just be funny. But what I wanted to finish saying is that they have now accepted for debate a petition through NGOs, which originally, of course, is on behalf of the Gazans, against the withholding of humanitarian aid. So you have the Trump administration applying pressure, the Netanyahu government saying there will be no more humanitarian aid until you give us back our hostages. And now the Supreme Court is attempting to debate the legality of our policy against Hamas.
Okay, well, now this has been going on from the beginning, though, so from October 7th in one form or another. So why do you think, put yourself in the shoes of Prime Minister Netanyahu, and why do you think he decided to move at this moment against Ronnen Bar?
Two things, I think. First of all, there is the tailwind from the Trump administration. That is very important here. Remember, for Netanyahu to run the war, he had three obstacles: the anti-Netanyahu forces here, who are manipulating the most painful issue, which is the hostages. The other is the Biden administration stepping on our air supply, which is our ammunition supply, and an IDF chief, which was basically continuously in a state of insubordination, sabotaging the plan to control the territory. And so everything, and while this is going on, he's standing trial, right? He has 3 days, because the judges said it's the public interest to finish this trial early, so the prime minister can't tend to the war because he had to testify about presents he got from friends. So this coalition is weakening, and this is why I think he has moved now. But the other most obvious reason is that Shabak is moving against Netanyahu. They've started this it's like the Russian hoax, basically. It's this Qatar Gates. One of his advisors received money from someone who was also receiving money from Qatar because he was doing, I don't know, PR work. So they now are telling you that the prime minister's office is actually infested by Qatari representatives. And these are his closest.
Let me tell you a story. Somebody came through my office, maybe 6 months ago. I can't date, but months ago. And he had just come from Israel, and he had met with Ronnen Bar. And he was arguing with me very, very strenuously about the Qatar business. And you know that I am not an enemy of Turkey. I'm not an enemy of Qatar, which doesn't mean I think that everything that Qatar does is wonderful. But I have a different understanding about how this works. And I think the fish stinks from the head. What we ought to be talking about is the right American policy, because the right American policy will produce a different behavior on the part of Qatar. The Qataris are doing what a lot of what they're doing is what the United States wants them to do. And in Gaza, a lot of what they did is what the Israelis wanted them to do, and so on. So anyway, that's my view. We don't have to argue about it now or discuss it now, but I argued it strenuously with this guy. And this guy said to me, no, Mike, you've got it totally wrong. Because I made the point that, look, what the Qataris did is what the Israelis asked them to do. So let's start with that. And he said, no. I just talked to Ronnen Bar, and he told me that it was way worse than anyone understood, and that there were secret funds that the Qataris were distributing that we didn't know anything about, and so on and so forth. And I filed that away. I didn't know what to think about it. But now I think, wow, this is very interesting. This was being planned. How many people are out there screaming about Qatar were told by Ronnen Bar that the real problem is Qatar?
Yeah, absolutely. He's trying to create. I said this, I think, here, that he's taking a page from James Comey's book. That's how they prevented Donald Trump from finding out that they infiltrated his campaign. They did that by appointing Robert Mueller and accusing Trump directly, and so he was under a conflict of interest and couldn't do anything. So that's the plan. I want to finish this segment so we can move on to other things. But what I want to mention in the end is that the former heads of Shabak are also ganging up on Netanyahu. And now that this is a very serious issue, they have the Nadav Argaman, former head of Shabak, also he has interest here too, is threatening directly to reveal information that was privately collected by Shabak security bodyguards about the Netanyahu government. He directly said this on the press. And
I saw that.
One of the signs of the times is that he was asked to be interrogated. He was subpoenaed to be interrogated by the Israeli police. You cannot extort. The extortion is against the law, and you cannot use such information. And it just gives you an idea of how they feel secure and how cocky they are, and how they know that they're above the law. He's doing something that, someone made a short video, which was produced by a courtesy of AI, of, Nadav Argaman as a Marlon Brando godfather saying, Netanyahu, you've got a pretty face. Why would you want to mess with it? That's how they're behaving. And so the last part of the answer to your question is that they gave Netanyahu no choice. Once you threaten publicly, you threaten a prime minister publicly, it's humiliating enough that the prime minister cannot afford to ignore this. And also, you can't function if Shabak is threatening you. If your secret police is threatening your family, you cannot run a country. And the media is just, obfuscating the severity of this situation. But this is a real crisis and a real crazy situation. We have a secret police threatening an elected government. This is a threat of a coup. And that's
the definition of democracy, Gadi, is a secret police that can hold the prime minister to account.
Exactly, because who will monitor these crazy politicians who are liable to miscalculation? Okay, Mike, we don't have enough time for the Mike segment, so let's keep them short.
Well, look, the most important Mike segment here is really the Houthis. This is because it's not the Houthis, it's the Iran policy. And I'll try to keep it really short here, but just say over the weekend, the U.S. That's last weekend, the U.S. carried out significant attacks against the Houthis, attacks that represented a complete change in the rules of engagement between the U.S. military and the Houthis. On top of that, Donald Trump posted on Truth Social that he would from now on hold the Iranians directly responsible for the actions of the Houthis.
Mike, so, that's your dream policy. That's what you're saying.
It's absolutely my dream policy. We all know that the Iranians are behind all their proxies.
Let me mention what you said. Every time we talked about American reactions to the proxy attacks on American forces and on Israelis, you said, pay attention to the fact that not a single Iranian has been attacked in all this brouhaha.
Right. And by the way, right now we have a statement of principle. We don't actually have the action to back it up. Well, so it's not it. I tweeted today that Trump's Iran policy is now letter perfect. That's actually a slight exaggeration. It's in the direction of letter perfect. It's in the direction of letter perfect. But so far, there's not. I would be churlish if I started complaining about what's happening because he's moving. The statements are exactly right. The holding the Iranians accountable is exactly right. And so there's two ways to interpret what he's doing with the Houthis. Let's take it back to Israel. Netanyahu comes to Washington after the inauguration. He sits with Trump. He has 2 hours one-on-one with Trump. What did he say in that meeting? Nobody knows, of course, but here's what I think he said. I think he said, Mr. President, you have an historic opportunity to take down Iran at very little cost, at very little risk. We Israel have hollowed out the resistance axis. All that's left is that's a serious threat now are the Houthis and Iran's nuclear program. The big problem is the nuclear program, and we can take that down. It's best if we do this together, the United States and Israel. Israel will do most of the work, but we need help from the Americans in a few areas. We don't need to bother with what those are, but the Israelis do need help. And Mr. President, this will assure your position in history as the person who decisively ended this threat to the United States and to the world. And then he also says, this is a great way to have a demonstration effect on Beijing and on Moscow. Iran is their ally, but also it shows you're willing to actually take action decisively and take care of threats. So this will also position you well with regard to your negotiations with Putin and with Xi Jinping. And he said, finally, we have a short window of opportunity. Iran's very close to building a nuclear weapon. We have to act now. Donald Trump answered and he said, I agree with everything you're saying. It makes perfect sense. For my own reasons, for my own understanding of American national security, I want to take down Iran. But I've got a lot of stuff going on right now. I've got a lot of stuff going on. I got the border. I've got the tariffs. I've got the war in Ukraine and so on. And so starting a conflict like this right now isn't exactly what I want to do. It's not exactly what I want to do. I want to give it some time, and I want to offer the Iranians an opportunity to negotiate. I want to give them that opportunity. I don't think it'll work, but we have to at least let it try. So I'm going to impose severe sanctions on them and let them know that there's economic hell coming for them if they don't negotiate. But let's give it a little bit of time and see if we can get some negotiations going. Netanyahu didn't love that, but he said okay because he felt that that truly the strategic goal between the United States and that Israel and the United States share the same strategic goal. They just have different tactics about how to achieve it. That's what Americans always say when there's a disagreement with the Israelis. But this time, Netanyahu truly believes it. But they agree on an interim step, which is to take down the Houthis, all right, or at least knock them down a few.
This is your interpretation, just to be clear.
Oh yeah. This is all me. This is me, and but not.
It's not a wild one.
It's not a wild one. I've gotten data here and there. Nobody's told me what Netanyahu and Trump said. But anyway, it's in the nature of things that this is how the conversation went, right? So, but then they decide to take down the Houthis. Now, from the American point of view, a military action can be designed to have an impact on, is of course designed to have an impact on your enemy, but it's also designed to give the leader, the political leader, Donald Trump, the president, options. So we can interpret the attack on the Houthis as two different scenarios, and they're not mutually contradictory because they're giving the president an option. Scenario one is we are improving the president's position in the negotiations with the Iranians. We're taking away this proxy from them, the last proxy that they have. We're taking that away from them. But there's also the demonstration effect on Tehran saying, I'm willing to use force. Unlike the Biden team, I'm willing to use force and I will use it against you. He's saying it very, very clearly. That's in order to bring them to the table to negotiate. The other alternative, Gadi, is that the war to end Iran's nuclear program has already begun. And this attack on the Houthis was the first shot, because you want to prepare the battlefield for the conflict, and you want to take, just like remember back in after October 7th, and we were thinking about war with Iran, between Israel and Iran, and we were all worried. Everyone was worried. Every Israeli was worried about the huge arsenal that Hezbollah had. Ballistic missiles, many of them precision guided, could hit every Israeli city. Now, in the end, the Israelis degraded that, and the full threat never materialized. But it was a threat. It was serious, and it had prior to
and it was a policy that made sense and was sophisticated. They had a border with us. We didn't have a border with them. They had a front force that was, as we saw it, the protection of the Iranian nuclear program.
Right. So now it's been degraded, and all those fears the Israelis have killed Nasrallah. We had the pager, the pager, the Grim Beeper, and we had and Assad has fallen, and the whole balance of power between Israel and Iran has shifted dramatically in Israel's favor. But we still have that Houthi menace out there, and that's not a minor thing. So Israel and the United States are getting rid of the Houthi menace, or really degrading it significantly, in preparation for the attack on Iran's nuclear program. Is it scenario A?
The Houthis have improved considerably. They now time their attacks to such a time that they wake you up with the sirens after you can no longer go to sleep before your own alarm.
That's like what? That's like what? 3 a.m? Is that
what? 4.
4. Oh, 4. Yeah, that's terrible. Right. When you wake up.
So
hour.
they know us better and they become more effective.
Sons of bitches. That is really
Yeah.
sinister. That is really sinister. And especially, I mean, you get to be a certain age like us, and you don't sleep as well anymore.
Yeah, that dooms your night.
Yeah, and then
It
everyone's
dooms you to more productivity.
everyone is irritable. Okay. So anyway, scenario A, negotiations. Scenario B, the war has begun. Take your
I'm
pick.
tempted. We don't have time, but I'm tempted to ask you a question. Which I've heard from experts. Experts said, we in Israel, we always think that negotiations and nuclear agreements are just a sham. But what if there is an effective agreement? And an effective agreement is the dismantling of all the centrifuges and the three real bases of the Iranian program. Is there any deal, Mike, that you think you would see as a solution to the problem?
Well, Netanyahu in I think it was in 2012. I could be wrong with the date at the UN at the UN General Assembly. He offered, this is under Obama. He offered an agreement, the outlines of an agreement that Israel would accept with limited enrichment I believe I'd have to go back and look at it by the Iranians. Believe me, the Iranians, they never give up anything in a negotiation without getting a lot in return. And the Iranians will never just fold on their knees and say, "We give you what you want, uncle." That never happens. And they will, if they ever get to the point where one of the principles through the negotiation has always been, we will not dismantle a single centrifuge. By the way, you called it a centrifuge. I always find it funny when you mispronounce English words, because you're so talented in language and your English is so idiomatic, but then every now and then you have one that stands out.
These are words that I only read. It happens often.
I know. I understand. It amuses me. A centrifuge. It sounds like some kind of musical piece.
It never happens to me in French, because I know only one word and I pronounce it well.
Which is?
Oui.
Oui. I know one.
Israelis
I know
are
one sentence. I know one sentence in French. Où sont les neiges d'antan? You know what that means?
No. Is it something we can say for our audiences, or is
sure. It's
PG-13?
In Hebrew it would be Heichan Shilgei Eshtekad.
Oh, that's wonderful. Where are the snow? There were numerous such questions in Catch 22. I now forget them. I used to know them by heart. Someone there is.
That's probably where I got it. That's probably where I got it. I remember I read it in a novel somewhere.
Yeah.
Où sont les neiges d'antan? Somebody was walking around all the time saying "Où sont les neiges d'antan?" I thought it was funny.
In Hebrew, the elegant way to say is you say, someone cares about something, כמו השלג דאשתקד. זה מעניין אותי כמו השלג דאשתקד, because it's combined with Aramaic, so it's elegant.
But that's sarcastic. I care about that. That's sarcastic.
Yeah, sarcastic. I care about this like the snows of yesteryear.
Yeah,
especially poignant in Tel Aviv, where for every yesteryear in known memory there was no snow, except in 1950 there was a snow here in Tel Aviv. I come from Jerusalem, so I had a lot of snow. Mike, we have Gaza on the table. I've said that we can now win the war, but first, your introduction.
No, look. I think that we're still in hostage negotiations with. We're still in hostage negotiations with Hamas within the Witkoff framework. Witkoff tried to expand stage one of this three-stage agreement that Biden put on the table. Witkoff doesn't want to get to stage two and stage three because those are about handing victory to Hamas. So he was trying to get some kind of hostage release. Let's say 12 hostages. There were 24 who are alive. Let's say 12 hostages in return for an expanded ceasefire. Hamas refused to play ball. And so the Israeli government has upped the pressure through withholding humanitarian supplies, which is the way that Hamas enriches itself, and by putting military pressure on Hamas on all levels. But I think we're still in negotiation mode. I don't think this is
Yeah.
a year from now we may look back and say
First
a
of
whole
all,
new
action began. Action began. Military
action
action has
began.
begun.
Action began, but I think that the thinking, I assume, I don't have any information. I assume that the thinking in the prime minister's office is that this is in order to get a hostage deal, because the Israeli whole, as we're talking here, the whole system is still wrapped up with the hostages.
Yeah, and shamefully, the opposition leaders are basically towing the Hamas line and saying any military action, it means a death sentence to the hostages. This is what Yair Lapid said. Even if that were true, you're in the Israeli side. You shouldn't be saying that. That is disgusting.
Who's Yair Lapid?
Yair Lapid is do you know all the AI? I guess I'm saying AI about everything. The animation has been shot. We are the majority, with a poll saying that he now has projected 6 seats in parliament. But Hamas is look, the line of the opposition, Hamas and Yair Lapid, the whole opposition, and the press, is that resumption of hostilities means a death sentence to the hostages, while this is patently not true. The prime minister said this very clearly, and everybody who knows anything understands that Hamas only gave up hostages under military pressure. Never has it given hostages according to some goodwill. And so the whole idea that we should make more and more concessions is misguided. It's not a coincidence, because the cynical players in this game want Israel to finish without a clear victory. We know why the Biden administration wanted that. It's the same reason that the Israeli left wants it, because it thinks that a chastened Israel would be more accommodating of concessions and will be able to return to the two-state strike. They think that they can impose the Kissingerian framework of Yom Kippur on the Gaza war, where Kissinger, we'll remind you, you've written about this in detail. Kissinger arranged for a non-decisive victory in order to help the Egyptians save face, that so they can make the concessions that would enable them to transfer their loyalty to the West and leave the camp of the Soviets. So the Israeli left also thinks that if Israel does not win a decisive victory, and they're afraid that Israel would occupy Gaza again, that Israel will cooperate with a Trump plan to empty the Gaza Strip of its residents, which is for the left a horrifying thing, because it believes that transfer of population is a non-negotiable red line on general principle, except if it's settlers, then you can kick them out of wherever. Their plan is to kick out about 500,000 people from Judea and Samaria. So that's their plan, and this is why they want to prevent victory, and they're using the hostage issue for that, because the second phase is Hamas will never accept the second phase, but the Israeli press is because the second phase means giving up Gaza, and Hamas will never do that. What Hamas is demanding is an international mechanism which even the American administration will not be able to undo to end the war. So they want a Security Council resolution that the war would be over and the ceasefire would be permanent and Hamas would stay in power. And then if it's a Security Council resolution, then even the United States will not be able to overturn it, because there would be a Chinese and a Russian veto. So that's where things stand. The left and Yair Lapid and the opposition have also another consideration. If Netanyahu fails to win the war, he will be toppled. So they are playing a very cynical game. But Mike, we finally have at least the opportunity to win this war, which, as you and I and many others have been saying since the beginning, you cannot win this war unless you completely control the territory. You cannot win this war with raids. And so what the IDF has been dragging its legs and refusing to do is take control of the humanitarian
dragging its feet.
Dragging its feet. And you just mentioned because in Hebrew it's like lion.
Yeah, I know.
The problem is that you speak Hebrew, so you know where the origin of my mistakes. So the IDF has been dragging its feet in controlling the humanitarian.
You'll forgive me. When we speak Hebrew together, you're always very forgiving of all my horrible mistakes. It's only because I only do it because your English is so perfect, except for these little things.
You're encouraging me to make mistakes because every time you correct me, you emphasize how good my English is. So I'm
it is though. No. You're very good. You're very gifted.
You neutralize objection while you pickfare me.
No, you have a gift with languages in general. You were blessed with I don't know. See, I'm not blessed with the same thing, so I can't find the right word to describe what you have.
But enough about me now. Let's talk about my work.
Yes.
So the IDF has been dragging its feet in controlling the humanitarian aid and in taking control of a territory. And now there was this morning a message, a press release by the Minister of Defense, Israel Katz, who said we are taking control of more and more territories. And mind you, Mike, he also said every day that the hostages are not returned to us, we will take territory and adjoin them to Israel. I'm using a strange term here.
Did he say that?
Because he did not say annex. He did not say annex.
Yeah, he was careful
But he's inching towards what some of us have been advocating as instead of what the anti-Bibi forces manipulating the hostage families to demand concessions from Israel, we have been saying if you want hostages, then you should announce to Hamas that every day you will take 10 square miles and annex them to Israel. Because according to their religion, which they take very seriously, the only reason to postpone jihad is if you're in danger of losing territory. But we didn't do it. Perhaps we'll do it now. But now we have we now have a chief of staff of the IDF who is willing to implement, strange as it may be sound in Israeli democracy, the actual policy of the elected government. So there are great expectations on that front. All right. Shall we go to the ritual of me attempting to move to another segment and you saying, however, yes, no?
Yeah, no, we're not. I have to ask you one question because I realize it's in some ways it's the most important question. And it takes us back to our original discussion, to your first segment here. And that is this contest between Netanyahu and Ronnen Bar. How is it going to play out? Who's going to win?
I think the government is going to win.
How? Given the very strong position that the Supreme Court and the Attorney General have taken, how will they win?
Well, this is how I think it can play out. First of all, the government can drive it to a head-on collision. And then the question will be, will Shabak try to arrest Netanyahu? What will they do? Because when you have a coup, you need the army on your side. They had the brass on their side always, but the actual army and now the police are not going to play this coup game. So if that's an order, why won't Danny Levy, the new chief of police, say that he will arrest Ronnen Bar? In a proper democracy, Ronnen Bar would just
keep Ronnen Bar from going into his office, so you don't even have to arrest him. Yeah. Just segregate him from his.
By the way, he should have been arrested when the chief of a secret police announces that he will defy an elected government. The proper thing in a real democracy is to arrest him. but we are not a proper democracy. So this is one way it can play out. And I don't think they think that they can win, because what if you can't move the Israeli army against the government here? The Israeli army is not on their side, and the rank and file, neither are the rank and file of the police. But that's not a Netanyahu way to play this. So another way to play this would be they will announce that you can't fire Ronnen Bar, and Netanyahu said, I can't work with him. So I'm inviting his deputy to the next cabinet meeting. If the deputy refused to come, I will start regrouping and thinking how I should go about this. I said in the beginning of this program that there was a structural problem with Shabak in control of the intelligence and the IDF in control of the action. What if Netanyahu, without declarations, would just start moving the responsibilities of Shabak, which
they're military intelligence.
Military.
Right. Remember I told you that I'm very hesitant to bring this up because I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but I told you that there was that really striking thing that jumped out at me about the Americans moving to sanction Unit 504 of military intelligence, 504, which does human intelligence, and which is a rival to Shabak. If 504 starts putting agents on the ground, I'm sure they already have them, but if they put more agents on the ground in Gaza, then you don't need Shabak as much. So there are elements of what I'm trying to say is there are elements of military intelligence that you can start relying on more. Yeah.
So, but this opens the door for one more very interesting, very worrying, very concerning fact, in my opinion. But let's lay them out separately. So the other scenario is that Netanyahu just bypasses Shabak. Okay, you force me not to fire this guy. He's not entering our meetings. He's not.
Yeah. No, that's what he'll do. Yeah. I think that's as you were talking here, I was going through it in my head what the alternatives are, and that's what'll happen. They'll just without they'll just segregate him.
Yeah, and say, I said I've lost trust with him. You can't force me to work with him, so I'll start limiting his access to the actual action with a declaration or without a declaration. But now there are circles on the right who are calling for American intervention. And let me show you the gray area here. First of all, one very smart commentator, Tamir Morag, recommended you follow him, from Channel 14. I follow
him.
Yeah,
he has a Telegram channel.
He has a very good Telegram channel, also very funny and very witty. And he said, look, their idea to remove Netanyahu, but by what they called essential incapacitation. That is a situation where they'll use the incapacitation clause, widen it from its original medical intention, and say Netanyahu can't run the war while he's on trial. So the attorney general will declare him essentially incapacitated and you will be removed from office. What Tamir Morag said is, forget about that. That is no longer an option, because what are you people going to do if after you declare Netanyahu incapacitated and Donald Trump invites him as the head of state to a visit in Washington? What then will you say?
But there's another option, which hadn't occurred to me until you mentioned this, is that Netanyahu could ask Donald Trump to have the CIA, the ODNI, and the FBI basically treat Ronnen Bar as if he's essentially incapacitated, and refuse to actually deal with him. So if the cooperation with the United States and the Shabak were impaired by Ronnen Bar's essential incapacitation, then that would also put pressure on him.
I haven't thought of that, but that's certainly an option. Where does this become dangerous? There are calls now among even Israeli jurists on the right saying that the American administration should do what the Biden administration did to the right. It should do to the left what they did to the right. And they're calling for sanctions on Israeli citizens. But mind you, there's now talk about if a situation where the Supreme Court will support Gali Barav Miara, will sabotage the Netanyahu administration, let alone will try to remove Netanyahu from office, there are voices calling for the Trump administration to put direct personal sanctions on the judges of our Supreme Court.
If I were an
in
Israeli,
my mind is a horrible
I was just about
idea.
to say, yeah, I was about to say, if I were an Israeli, that would offend my basic sense of
Sovereignty.
of sovereignty. Yeah,
Yeah, that
what
means
I would advocate if I were an Israeli, I'll advocate it as an American. I think there should be hearings in Congress about this thing that I wrote about during the war, the anti-Israel, the sanctions machine, and about how they organized their Israel policy. They ran their Israel. I'm talking about the Biden administration. They ran their Israel policy through the USAID and the humanitarian the humanitarian sections of the State Department and the democracy promotion sections of the State Department, and through the AG. What's the AG? The IG, the Inspector General. The judicial element of the State Department, completely unprecedented. I think there should be hearings about how the State Department made its Israel policy, and I think there should be hearings into how they got their information, and they should see if there were Israelis who were supplying this machine with information. I'm sure there were, and publicize their names. Israel can do what it wants through its own judicial and political processes with those people, but there had to have been some very, very close cooperation between the sanctions elements and the and Israeli elements, and that you can bring to light. But I wouldn't go further than that. I wouldn't ask the Americans to intervene
in the relations between the branches of government. That is giving up our sovereignty. And as you know, Mike, I'm a follower of your senior fellow, John Fonte, and I'm a radical sovereigntist. And I was worried when Trump said that he would take over Gaza, because I don't want to be, as much as I love America, America is too big to be our direct neighbor, and it's like having a huge boulder that might roll over you on the way to somewhere unintentionally. But this is too big, and with all the love, and as you know, my profession is American history. My love of America began when I was a child. All my literary loves and musical loves were all American. With all that, I would not like Israel to become the 51st state. So with that, I think you don't have a dumbest take on the news, but I have one that I'm wondering if it is hilarious or too tragic to be funny, but I think you will laugh. There was an official Hamas press release in support of Ronnen Bar against Netanyahu.
Was there really?
Yes, there was. I got it from the Abu Ali Telegram.
Did you tweet it out? That's hilarious.
I tweeted it out, and one must say,
wait, is it real? That's too good.
It's absolutely real. I'll translate it for you. Abu Ali writes, Hamas publishes a bulletin, or karoz, a pamphlet, formal about the dismissing of the head of the Israeli Shabak, and it says as follows: the declaration, the announcements or the declarations of the head of Shabak reveal the criminal Netanyahu was the one who sabotaged the negotiations about the hostage deal in order to foil them. And so it goes on. So you see, they are using Ronen Shabak to prove that Netanyahu is a criminal and that Israel's fault. So they are playing into the left's demonstrations, right? So somebody already tweeted out Why don't Hamas send their representatives to the Kaplan demonstrations? And somebody else says, why don't they petition the court against the Netanyahu dismissal of Ronnen Bar? So that's where we are. Yeah, it's funny, but it's also terrible.
That's
And
hilarious.
what nightmare would you think that your enemies would rally to support the head of your secret police against your own government? So
I don't think Ronnen Bar, when he saw that, I don't think he laughed.
No, I don't think he laughed. And I did my best to bring it to his attention by tweeting it.
By the way, both Ronnen Bar and Argaman have shaved heads, like like they keep their hair very, very short. Is that a Shabak thing, or is it a?
No, I think it's just a manly thing to do after a certain age.
No, I don't think they're bald. I think they're just.
I think they are at least balding. But
okay.
Yeah, some do that. Some do. Don't you call that a navy crew cut? No, a navy crew cut leaves
no, yeah, that's different.
Leaves the top.
Yeah.
So that's where things stand now. We're in the midst of a crisis, and I hope that for next time we will have good news for you about the Israeli democracy raising its head again from under the blanket of the deep state.
We don't have time to do readers' comments. We'll make up for that next time. But I just want to flag one thing for everybody. Yeah. Maybe actually even introduce a new segment for us, Gadi.
You're going to do that live without even,
okay. Yeah. I'm just going to do as your co-host, I can do this kind of thing. There's an article I want to flag for everybody. We can talk about it next time. It's by our friend Tony Badran at Tablet Magazine, and it's called "The Rights Sectarian Moment." I think it's a really important article. It's not an easy read in the sense that it's long, nuanced, talking about unfamiliar things, not designed to give everybody pleasure, with their political views. I think it's really important. The rights sectarian moment. I won't say anything more about it. Have a look at it. We'll talk about it next time.
So the segment will be recommended reading?
I think when there's an article like this, I think we should have it doesn't have to be every week, but sort of the article of the week. For me, this article is one that everyone has to read.
I haven't, so indeed I will. And hopefully we will be able to schedule our next episode closer to the middle of the week.
When are you going to be able to do it? This is more about you than me, right? So is it Thursdays you're going to be able to do it?
Mike, are you also going to do the scheduling live? I think announcing new segments is enough for.
I just want to help our audience have a sense of what's going on, because I don't have a sense. So help us.
So
help them.
Why don't you stay on the Zoom after we say goodbye to our audience? Thank you for being with us. Mike, you should say now, don't forget to
like us, subscribe, and leave a comment, preferably a laudatory comment, but we'll take insults as well. No problem. Just comment.
So we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us.